You're listening to the Infinite Banking Mastery Podcast. Did you know that you could build a tax-free pool of wealth that's liquid and accessible all your life while building your retirement nest egg? Gain full control of your financial future and stop relying on the government and banks. The wealthy have already discovered this wealth-building secret. Now it's your turn to get financially secure without following the conventional wisdom that keeps you in debt to banks. Now here's your host, Valerie LaRocque.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Infinite Banking Mastery Podcast. Thank you for listening and being here. As I record this, it's almost first day of summer, which is terrific. So exciting. We love summer. So last week, actually, I was able to attend a leaders conference with a primary life insurance company that I work with for the purpose of the infinite banking concept. And I had the opportunity to speak to one of the senior actuaries, which I will always welcome. And I had an opportunity to speak with him the night before we left. I just ran into him and thought I would ask some questions on MEC, because what better time to do so than when you're in the middle of a company party and all having dinner and watching some Hawaiian dancers. I mean, what better time could there be? We were in Hawaii for this leaders conference. It was really beautiful, really warm. It was fun. Got to hang out in the ocean. It was great just to get together. It's always fun to see colleagues and friends who we don't really see often, except for maybe once a year, and hang out and talk to each other about what we're all doing and learn from one another. It's always great. So I was sitting there talking with him, and I wanted to ask him some questions on MEC, because what I noticed lately in the industry as a whole is that agents out there are trying to be, I would say, super competitive, and so are creating these illustrations that look as good as possible, but they're really building them to have as much possible cash value available in those first years, maybe the first 1, 2, 3 years, the first 10 years. They're trying to build policies that have the most possible cash available as compared to what you've paid into the contract. And in my opinion, that's pretty dangerous, because you have to maneuver in the internal life insurance, the death benefit inside the contract, and you have to do certain things to be able to do that. And so I just wanted to ask, how dangerous is that? What's going on with that? A lot of people are trying to win, I would say, business by creating illustrations that, in my opinion, are more dangerous. And so it was nice to have it confirmed straight from a senior actuary who's building these policies that a higher base premium, as opposed to adding tons of term insurance as a term rider inside of the whole life contract, is going to be safer for keeping the policy from becoming a modified endowment contract. And I've shared this before, and that's something I was also reading in another book and learning. And it's just something I wanted to make sure to let you all know, that you want to have a decent base premium, not only for long-term, to have more cash long-term in your policy, but really to protect from becoming a modified endowment contract. So if you're comparing a policy, if your agent is showing you, hey, you can build it this way, you'll have access to more cash in the beginning years, or build it this way, and you won't have access to quite as much, but it'll be really good still, really close. But you'll have more cash later, most likely. The safer policy is going to be the one with the higher base premium. It's just going to be more sturdy, and you don't have to be concerned about what could happen in the future. So I just wanted to confirm again with an actuary, just directly talking to him, because I always want to be sure I'm doing my absolute best to build policies that are safe from becoming taxable. We do not want it to become taxable in your future, and I'm always wanting to make sure I'm doing the best possible job for my clients. And frankly, I will never pass up an opportunity to speak to an actuary. I mentioned to him, if you're giving a presentation, I'm going to be in the room because I want to hear what you have to say. So he also mentioned that the MEC test can restart if there are big changes to policy premiums. That something like that could restart the MEC test, which is another reason to boost the safety with more base premium. Now, I do add term riders inside of my policies to get them to a place where it's comfortable for the client to try to achieve the goals that you're trying to achieve. I do use that feature, but I'm always trying to make sure that there's a cushion, because once it becomes a MEC, if it doesn't get rewound pretty quick, you can't go back. You can't change it back. There's nothing you can do. It's just a MEC policy going forward. This actuary mentioned as well that some policies or some companies test more strictly. Like, for example, this particular company, they're really looking out for that MEC line, and other companies are more lenient when it comes to the illustration. But just because a company is lenient and so doesn't show a policy becoming a MEC on the illustration, doesn't mean that it can't or that it won't. I've dealt with some companies that will allow you to pay the paid up additions premium for many, many years or allow you to build it a certain way and it's not illustrating as a MEC. And I think just those companies aren't as strict when it comes to keeping track of and paying attention and testing for that. But it sounds like it still is a risk. So even though that might not come out looking like a MEC modified endowment contract on an illustration, you still got to look out for that and make sure there's a cushion, some room with your policy so that that's not a risk in the future when maybe it's 10, 20 years from now. You just don't want to have that risk that many years out. Maybe your agent's not even in the business anymore, or maybe they've retired. You just want to have that safety built in. And really, talking about the safety and the building of the contract, building a contract the way that Nelson Nash originally illustrated in his book, Becoming Your Own Banker, and the way that he would taught us agents and advisors, those of us who got to listen to him and meet with him, he really was teaching a very safe way to structure a policy for this purpose. And since he shared this concept with many of us in the world and all of that, since that came out and all sorts of people are building it their own way and doing all sorts of things, certainly people have come up with different structures and building it different ways, but that doesn't mean that they're better ways. It's going to look different, but he really had a good, sturdy, stable, safe way of building a contract so that you can utilize it for cash growth and financing the things you want to buy or the things you want to purchase or paying off debt or investing in other cash flowing assets. He really had a good, safe structure down. And so when I'm helping clients, I really start with that and then kind of maneuver from there as needed. But again, we want to have a cushion. So, anyhow, after talking to this actuary, I then went on and did further research regarding IULs, index universal life policies, which again are super popular right now. I know I've mentioned this before. I met with a group recently and their group's talking about it and they're learning from people who are talking about it. It's really very popular topic right now, that type of policy. And I read that the flexibility, which is part of what people love so much about this type of policy, actually causes those policies to be more risky than a whole life policy. With universal life, one thing that people love about this type of policy is that premiums are truly flexible, as in you can totally skip the premium. So if you have enough cash value inside the policy, then the cost of insurance, which still has to get paid and is generally lower than the premium, can be paid from the funds within the policy. So they'll just take that cost right out of the policy. Whereas with whole life, you can't skip your premiums. You can not pay your paid up additions premium because that is flexible and that is just something you are choosing to add, but it's not a requirement. It's the base premium that is the required premium to pay because the base premium is what is supporting the death benefit. So that premium has to get paid. And if you have a hardship or something happens, no, you can't just skip altogether the premium. You can't just say, I can't fund the base premium. I can't fund any premium. You can drop the paid up additions. You can skip that for a year or more, but you're not going to be able to skip the base. Whereas with a universal life policy, you can skip premiums. And so that's where people like that flexibility. But if you have a whole life policy and you have a hardship, one thing you can do is you can borrow against your policy's cash value to fund the premium for that year. And so there still are ways to get around it and to allow you that flexibility if something unexpected happens. It just doesn't work quite the same. Another thing that's different with a universal life policy and the flexibility that people love or like about it is that you can send in a whole chunk of money all of a sudden. You could be sending, say, $2,400 a year for so many years, and then maybe just plop 30,000 in later on. You just want to put this extra chunk in. So you can do that, and you still could MEC it. So you still got to watch out and kind of pay attention and check with the company on how much you could put in as a lump sum if you're trying to do something like that. But with a whole life policy, we're from the start building at a ceiling. So we already are projecting your anticipated deposits into this policy. And whatever that anticipated deposit is really usually the top of your MEC ceiling or really close to it. So you don't have the opportunity then to go over and above that with another 20,000 next year or something like that. You start with your amount, and that's really at your MEC ceiling. And if you need to drop your premium, that's no problem. It's very easy to do that. You can drop off the paid up additions. That's not required, but you can't go higher than where you started. So I tell clients all the time, if you're not sure what premium to start with, I would start at the higher end of your budget because you can easily drop that down the next year or the following year or whenever you might need to, but you can't increase it. If you want to increase your deposits or what you're funding into your whole life policy, you're going to have to start a second policy. Oh, and one thing I wanted to make sure to make clear is that this mass flexibility within the universal life policies, being able to skip premium altogether or put a huge lump sum when you've been paying really low premiums for a long time, it sounds like that's really where the risk comes in for the MEC test, because the MEC test could restart with big material changes. And so something like that could cause that MEC test to restart. In addition, and I'm sure I've mentioned this before with a whole life policy, is you're able to truly stop premiums altogether without losing the contract. So you could say start a policy at age 45, and let's just say decide to stop funding it at age 65, and your policy will remain intact and continue to be guaranteed to pay a death benefit to age 121. And during that time, you'll have access to the cash value as well. However, when talking about an IUL, universal life policy, an index universal life policy, even though an agent will illustrate an IUL showing how you could stop premiums altogether and then start drawing cash from it, that is actually dangerous. Because remember, these IUL policies come with increasing costs as you age. So the illustration might project success if you were to fund from age 45 to 65 and then stop, but it's not trustworthy with the increasing costs inside. Now, it happens to be very popular out there for agents to show premiums stopping at some future age and then withdrawals beginning or loans from the policy or against the policy in retirement years. It's very popular for people to show that with IUL policies. But again, in my opinion, is very dangerous because you don't know how your policy will perform in future years with the floor of zero and the cap. Remember, the caps can change every year. So you generally would have a floor of zero and a cap of, say, 10%, 12%, 8%, meaning that whatever the S&P 500 does from your anniversary date to your next anniversary date, you would receive that return between a floor and a cap. But you're not invested directly into the S&P 500, and that cap can change every single year. So you don't know how your policy will perform with that interest earning strategy for the lifetime of your policy. And it's certainly not going to perform exactly as you see on your illustration, because it's not going to do the same exact interest rate every single year for that average you're looking at on your policy. So you don't know how it will perform in future years. You don't know if the company will raise their costs to the maximum allowable, which is written in your contract if you have one of these contracts. And you don't know if increasing costs as you age, which is definitely going to happen, will require you to hold more cash inside the policy than you have, especially if you're using it, withdrawing it, borrowing against it. That's going to reduce the value that they're going to need to pull those extra costs out of. That's going to reduce that value as well. So that's really all I have for you today. I just wanted to share my conversation with the actuary and just thought I would explain what we talked about and how I was confirmed yet again that IULs are not as safe for this strategy, and how having a higher base premium is one of the best protections against MEC for your policy. If any of you are feeling ready to get started on this journey and think, I'm ready to start a banking system for myself, and I want to look into how we get started, and you want to talk with someone about your specific situation to learn how this could work for you, I am more than happy to talk with you. You can reach out to me at Valerie@alphaomegawealth.com, and we can go over your personal situation and look into how this strategy could work for you. I would love to partner with you as your advisor and coach going forward. As always, thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. And thank you for sharing the podcast. I look forward to sharing again with you next week. Take care.